Hello everyone, today we continue to bring you BL drama SaiDakPhaiSi the series. In the last issue, David took a drunken Lowry home and drew her naked while she was still in the room, which made Lowry very angry, but Lowry held her tongue, considering that she had taken care of herself all night. Lowry and David finally arrived at the door of the office. Lowry warns her partner again not to tell anyone about last night before they both walk into the office, but her co-workers are curious about Lowry's unexpected trip this morning. Yuri and Noe in particular kept asking questions. David went to great lengths to find an excuse, coupled with the majesty of Lowry's boss, to barely stave off the crowd. On the other hand, Liam and Bruce are filming a movie. In order to wrap up the day early, Bruce thought of a way to get Liam into the movie quickly. He went up and hugged the other guy. "Don't tell me, this hug, it seems to work." Liam's eyes filled with love at once. It looks like it's not far from actually moving. After a night of hangovers, Lowry finally returns to her home with a half-naked portrait in her hand. While he was still angry about it, David's call came in. This one knows Lowry too well to know that she is still angry about the painting, and even Lowry said she wanted to tear it up. David complains about Lowry's indifference, but at the same time, he takes out a copy of Lowry's portrait and says he's lucky he drew two of them. Good man, this is a cunning rabbit that is not tired of swindling. And Lowry is just saying, after all, the model in the painting is so handsome, he can afford to give it up. The company has a business trip to fuck it, so everyone gathers around to draw lots to decide who will go with Lowry. And this should be the kind of quota that should be up for grabs by everyone. But colleagues are all trembling with fear that they will be drawn. It seems that the boss is too bad to get along with and the employees can't stand it. Just as everyone has drawn their lots and is ready to show their cards, Bruce and his agent walk in to discuss the commercial. But Lowry frowns the second she saw Bruce. Everyone gathered in the conference room for Lowry's presentation of the proposal. But this time, he completely lost his previous thunderous appearance, swallowing in the middle of a speech with Bruce. Knowing the situation, Noe is a little worried and asks Lowry if she wants someone else to help with the introduction. Lowry doesn't agree, but he makes an excuse and leaves the conference room. David sees this and follows suit, and he gets Bruce's human stand-up from the store downstairs, beautifully named to fight fire with fire and be brave enough to face what he's afraid of. Lowry was definitely much better off after that interruption, and was in the mood to get her hands dirty with David. David was so relieved that he left a kiss on Lowry's forehead and a comforting hug. This behavior shocked Lowry and warned him. This time, Lowry came back in a much improved state and presented the proposal smoothly. To Bruce's satisfaction, the meeting ended successfully, and even when she said goodbye to Bruce, Lowry didn't lose her temper again. David saw this and couldn't help but come over to take credit, but all he got was breathlessness, plus a change of subject. Bruce is gone and it's time for everyone to announce their picks for Fuck It. Sure enough, David, the last one to open it, was the lucky one again. Lowry rolls her eyes when she hears the result, but David is happy and puts the heart in his hand on Lowry's chest. After that, the two went to fuck it together, but Lowry's cell phone has just disappeared. As someone who relies heavily on his cell phone, he simply can't bear to be without it. Not to mention the fact that the itinerary is all on his cell phone. So he orders David to call the company that sells cell phones and ask them to open their doors early to sell them to himself. I'm sure there are rich people. David doesn't agree. He doesn't want to bother anyone. Not to mention the itinerary is memorized, so he volunteers to be Lowry's assistant. There seems to be no other way, and Lowry agrees. The two come together to survey the landscape, and David carefully brings Lowry water. But David's attire was so sloppy that Lowry couldn't stand it and gave him her shirt. The first time I've ever seen a man with a big heart. I've seen a man with a big heart. At this point, Ada, a staff member at the hotel, walks up and gives the two a tour. The view is really nice and the equipment is pretty good, but Ada's hands are not too clean and she keeps trying to get close to Lowry. David looked on with great displeasure. Finally, the entourage dwindles, and Ada makes a big move, groping Lowry's ass, but he didn't expect David to show up the next second and knock himself out. Ada stood up and tried to deny it, but the witty David had already taken a cell phone and filmed it, and now the evidence is all there. Ada has nothing to say, but the next thing I knew, Lowry was saying she was sorry. David was very confused. Lowry, however, proceeded to utter the most vicious threats and warnings with the calmest of expressions, and then left the hotel with David. Luckily, Lowry didn't give in and David was very happy, but Lowry thinks that David is so grumpy, he'll get his ass kicked sooner or later. The sad not to say David is very good at getting to the point. Immediately heard that the boss is comforting himself and showed a standard broad smile. The two men, who had settled on a hotel, had to squeeze into a room. David doesn't care, but Lowry is disgusted. The other side of the toilet, do not wash their hands to touch their own clothes, but also to make clean. Lowry directly run out of breath, but cannot do anything about it, as there were no trips after 2 o'clock. The two Saturday on the beach, and ate a seafood dinner and played with the kids. But these two are just a little too bad at the game to lose to the kids and end up buried on the beach. The two were well buried, but a passing grandmother selling cotton candy captivated David. He comes out of the dirt and pulls Lowry up by the way. Only his math is really bad. 20 baht for 1, 100 baht for 3, and he happily bought 3 pieces of cotton candy. Lowry looked speechless, but David was still smiling broadly. He gives the marshmallows to Lowry, who refuses to eat them, but when the sugar is in the mouth, the desire for sweetness is still aroused. Lowry can't help but smile when she's nourished by sugar. On the other hand, Liam and Bruce are filming a movie. The two are very close as a couple. The manager was watching and couldn't help but be excited. It was Pearl who was a bit scary. At night, Lowry and David drink and talk on the beach. These two don't have a single dish, just David has 2 slices of calamari. Lowry is also drunk. Drunk Lowry is stubborn and adorable. David tries to send him back to his room, but Lowry is worried that he's drawing himself naked. The more he thinks about it, the more he feels disadvantaged. Lowry decides that today he will draw David. So, not knowing how the two operated, they both fell on the beach. Lowry uses her hand as a pen to trace the outline of David's face. This seductive situation makes David feel helpless and tries to push Lowry away. But the drunken Lowry is so stubborn that she kisses David directly on the mouth. After being surprised, David kissed him right back. So the two reveled in the beautiful moonlight and spent a marvelous night by the sea. The next morning, David looked at Lowry beside him with eyes full of love. But when David gently awakens Lowry, he realizes that 40 minutes have passed since he was supposed to meet Aunt Peg. So the two had to run. When they arrive at Aunt Pei's store, the store is already closed. But Lowry and Auntie Pui were well acquainted, and the two greeted each other warmly. Even David was a little surprised. Aunt Pei brings Lowry and David to a slightly older room and asks David if he wants to see Lowry as a child. Then, Auntie Pui takes out an old box containing photographs of more than one person, Lowry from her childhood and Bruce from her 5th year. Next, David is introduced to the relationship by Auntie Pei. It turns out that Lowry and Bruce are brothers in a reorganized family. The two grew up together and are especially close. Later, when his mom dies, Bruce feels that his dad doesn't love him and moves to this room to live with Aunt Pei. Listening to Auntie Pui's story and looking at the picture with her brother, Lowry also got wet. Next, the two leave Aunt Pei's house. David can't help but tell Lowry that at one point, he thought they were ex-boyfriends. Not to mention, Lowry's reaction to the previous one was quite similar. But brotherly love is also love. In order to keep Bruce, in fact, and Lowry also did a lot of stupid things. The year Bruce wanted to give up his dream of being an actor for his then-girlfriend Anne, and went to study abroad with her. Lowry learns about this and can't accept it or support it. It's not worth it for a girl, but Bruce feels that it's up to him and his girlfriend to decide. Lowry sees that her brother can't be persuaded, and has to use her love to try and get the other to stay. But I don't know if it was the move that shocked Bruce so much, or if it just didn't sit well with him. But he turned away. The memories are traumatizing. And with a hangover from last night, Lowry isn't in the best of shape. David brings coffee to clear the boss's head and subtly tries Lowry about the memory of the kiss that happened last night, and Lowry puts it off by forgetting it. Despite appearances, forgetting is impossible. After they have gone their separate ways, with music playing in the background, both of them stroke up their lips, recalling the kiss on the beach. And with that kiss, David was inspired to finally lay his hands on the painting titled Love. This good mood continued into the next day. David is even excited to sing to the chicks, and as David begins to examine his painting, Lowry calls. This is the end of David's vacation. David arrives at Lowry's house, and there is a handsome child lying on the couch. David is a little surprised. Is this Lowry's illegitimate son? Lowry was speechless and interrupted David's imagination. It turns out that this cute kid is Yuri's child Sullyan. She then fosters the child to the owner's home. Despite Lowry's refusal, Lowry thinks she can handle it, so she calls in David. David didn't want to agree, but his boss said there was overtime pay, so he decisively put his hand caressingly on Sullyan. But it didn't work. The baby was still crying from David. In order to stop the child's crying, Lowry and David had to take the little brat to the game room. A variety of games ranging from dance machines to basketball kept the three entertained. It looks like they are really a family of 3, and the picture is very cozy. On the other hand, Bruce and Liam are attending a press conference. The two just finished shooting the scene of the two interaction with the tacit understanding and sweet full. Let a crowd of people are very envious. Even after the launch, the two are still very much in sync. At this point, the two's managers also came over, and everyone was happy about the rise in popularity of their respective artists. But Pearl was not quite herself. She privately reviews Liam's preferences and hints at gifts to fans, which angers Liam, who finally stops holding back and for the first time, rebuffs his manager and leaves on his own. Bruce saw this and followed him out, and took Liam, who had come in his own car as well. On the other hand, David finally puts Sullivan to bed and tries to play hard to get staying in Lowry's bed. How could Lowry agree to that? The other party was still not moved, even though he was pampered, and he personally sent David downstairs without an access card. Meanwhile, Liam and Bruce show up at Lowry's house to deliver something. It's a good thing we're all here now. David sees Bruce and goes into jealous mode, saying that he spends a lot of time here, and Lowry has to stomp on him. But that's nothing, and it won't stop David from wanting to take a vow of ownership. Smart as Bruce is, he quickly realizes the hostility of his opponent and resists his jealousy. This somewhat strange situation is finally broken first by Lowry, who forcibly sends David away, and Bruce and Liam after David leaves. After such a long time, this is the first time that the four people are gathered in private, but each of the people with their own thoughts. As soon as they met, they begin to fight. What will happen to the deeply emotional couple after this? We'll see you on the next program.